Hello guys, welcome back to our anime explainer. Guys, please like the video and subscribe to my channel. Today is explanation of Tales of Herding God Part 237 based on novel. So let's start. When it comes to the villagers, his words couldn't help flowing out as he talked endlessly about their good points. First ancestor human emperor listened quietly. He only smiled and nodded after Qin Mu was finished. They have taught you well indeed. You are also very good. Qin Mu was taken aback and kept quiet. He was bewildered. Why did I tell him so much? I should be hating him. You are from Qin family, and I'm also from Qin family. You should just treat me as a senior from the same family. First ancestor human emperor seemed to know what he was thinking. He continued, now that you are facing a family member, you should have a lot of things you want to say. You must have not met any clansmen for a long time, right? Qin Mu nodded. Looking at this human emperor, he asked curiously, what's your name? Qin Wu. Qin Mu took out the family register of Qin family and flipped through in detail. He found Qin Wu's name and was awestruck at what he had seen. He was already an ancestor of 100 generations ago. At this moment, light suddenly appeared on the sea surface and surged forth like clouds. Huge bubbles came bubbling up from the sea. Qin Mu stood up and executed 9 heavens eyes awakening skills to look towards South Sea. His heart was in an endless loop of shock and amazement as multicolored lights shone out from underneath the sea. They were like the precious rays that were given off by a treasure. However, the sea surface was quite far away from here, and his eyesight couldn't see the bottom of the sea. He didn't know what was giving off the precious rays. First ancestor human emperor also stood up and looked over. The water is too deep. I can't see the bottom. Qin Mu immediately rose into the air and rushed towards the place where the precious light was emanating from. First ancestor human emperor frowned slightly. Why are you so curious? If someone was targeting you and deliberately created some abnormal sights, you will probably run headlong like a silly roe deer. He hurriedly flew over with Qin Mu. They were getting closer and closer to the abnormal phenomenon, and even first ancestor couldn't help feeling alarmed. The bubbles that were bubbling up to the surface were extremely huge, and every bubble had a radius of 100 miles. Dozens to hundreds of bubbles bubbling up at the same time made the sea look as though it was boiling. The huge waves that reached the sky surged out in all directions. Deafening rumbles sounded out, and they were shockingly beyond compare. Qin Mu frowned slightly and looked in the direction of eternal peace. He then turned around and chased after the waves. First ancestor human emperor quickly followed him and asked curiously, why did you turn back? Tsunami. Qin Mu rushed towards the shore as he said seriously, it's a tsunami. It will destroy dozens of miles of the shore. There are still people there. First ancestor human emperor came to realization and suddenly landed down from the sky. With his head below and legs above, his palm gently pressed on the sea surface. His body then instantly bounced back to stand beside Qin Mu, and he calmly said, there's nothing to worry about now. I just stopped the tsunami. Qin Mu immediately stopped and turned around to take a look. He saw that the sea was calm again, and the world-shaking tsunami had actually calmed down under the power of first ancestor human emperor's mudra. Remarkable. Qin Mu sighed in admiration, sticking up his thumb. Truly remarkable. I had originally wanted to fly back to the shore to save and evacuate the people. Never did I expect you to be even better, calming the tsunami directly. Superb divine art. First ancestor human emperor smiled slightly. Do you want to learn? In terms of sword skills, I'm inferior to you, but in terms of mudra skills, I far surpass you. As long as you are willing. Not interested. Qin Mu turned around to leave and rushed to where the precious rays were bursting forth from. There were no terrifyingly huge bubbles anymore, and only multicolored rays were pouring out continuously. First Ancestor Human Emperor shook his head, and quickly caught up to him while thinking to himself, I have ways to make you learn. Qin Mu took in a long breath, and suddenly dove into the sea. He dived straight down to the bottom of the ocean. First Ancestor Human Emperor caught up, and Qin Mu looked at him. He saw the vital qi around First Ancestor Human Emperor's body swirling and transforming into a huge ball. He just walked in the sea water as though it was flat land. First Ancestor saw him looking over and broke into a smile. If you want to learn. HMPH. Qin Mu executed his creation technique and transformed into a huge fish to swim away. First Ancestor Human Emperor didn't know whether to laugh or cry as he followed behind him. Qin Mu stopped swimming and blinked his eyes to look ahead. First Ancestor Human Emperor also stopped and saw a piece of ancient and magnificent land appearing in front of their eyes. The ancient shrines were giving off dense divine rays. There were also majestic god statues standing upright underwater. The outer layers of mud on the divine statues were slowly shedding off. Qin Mu's heart was shocked as he gradually swam into this ancient land. He suddenly remembered the star atlas that he had seen inside the shrine on the abnormal star above Luofu heaven. The place that was marked on the star atlas 35,000 years ago is right here. This is the ancestral land of Crimson Light era. This is the place God Kaiishi wanted to find. As he swam past the magnificent structures, he saw that he was not the only one here. There were also some strange life forms, and most of them were huge fishes that grew 3 heads and 6 fins. They swam on this piece of land and seemed to be patrolling. A huge green and white-colored fish swam above their heads. It gave off a low cry that reverberated in their chest. These huge fishes. First Ancestor Human Emperor had a change in expression and hurriedly grabbed Qin Mu's tail, pulling him into his vital qi bubble. He said solemnly, "These huge fishes are strange. Don't move by yourself." Qin Mu transformed back into his true form and asked curiously, "What's strange about them?" You know that the corporeal bodies of the gods of founding emperor era had turned into stone statues, and their primordial spirits had gone into hiding in Fengju, right? First Ancestor Human Emperor's gaze swept across these fishes with 3 heads and 6 fins. The gods of Crimson Light era probably used a different method. They transformed themselves into creatures to hide from the pursuit of the celestial heavens. Qin Mu's mind was blown as he stared blankly at a huge fish that had 3 heads and 6 fins. He cried out, "What you mean is, these fishes are gods of Crimson Light era. Not just the fishes, the other sea creatures too." First Ancestor Human Emperor looked at the other large-sized sea creatures that were swimming around. They also had 3 heads and 6 arms. They had huge membranes between their arms, so when they swam, the membranes would move up and down to push against the water. They swam very fast and were extremely agile in the water. Other than these sea beasts, there were actually sea snake demons with 3 heads and 6 arms. They had either a man's head or a woman's head. They also had arms and a flat tail. At that moment, they were currently swimming over to the ruins. Qin Mu even saw some walking plants that looked like corals and other vegetations in the sea. They had 3 crowns and their branches were definitely 6. There were also some strange creatures, like sea anemone and jellyfish, and they also had 3 heads and 6 arms. Some jellyfish even grew faces. Their tentacles swayed, and they seemed to hear some kind of call that was hard to detect as they swam towards the ruins. They didn't preserve their intelligence. Qin Mu asked in a shocked voice. These strange sea creatures disregarded them, and just swam around the ruins without any sort of direction, giving off cries that were low and melodious, or short and impassioned. They didn't treat Qin Mu and first ancestor human emperor as invaders, so that meant their intelligence wasn't awakened. They were just heading towards the call without knowing anything. They don't have intelligence. First ancestor human emperor brought him in front of a huge fish that was muddle-headed. Its huge eyes examined the two humans in front of it, but it soon lost interest in them and swam away. Only by doing so could they escape the pursuit of the celestial heavens. First ancestor seemed to sigh and said, "Looks like they were the same as founding emperor era, suffering a destructive blow and a crushing defeat, without any power to fight back at all. Thus, they might as well transform into sea creatures that had no minds of their own to show the celestial heavens that they were no longer a threat. Only then did they escape alive." The gods of Crimson Light era changed the form of their corporeal bodies, and their primordial spirits have also been sealed. Since they were turned into life forms of the sea, without their god powers and divine arts, they naturally posed no threat anymore. They luckily lived on. Meanwhile, another batch of gods of Crimson Light era journeyed far away to search for a place they could settle down. The person that's calling them over is Kaiishi. He's already here. Could he have some method to allow the beasts of Crimson Light era to recover their original bodies and awaken their consciousness again? Qin Mu considered it for a moment before continuing with, "No wonder he kept saying that he had to return to his ancestral land. If all of these huge beasts are gods, God Kaiishi will be able to amass an army of tens of thousands of gods. In that case, eternal peace." He shivered uncontrollably at the thought. More and more strange beasts gathered, and there was a huge variety of them. If these huge creatures all transformed into gods with 3 heads and 6 arms, the first place they would take over after coming to shore would be eternal peace. There were also quite a number of gods in eternal peace, but because the time for development was too short, the number of gods might just amount to 20. Most of the gods now were fighting with the devils in Supreme Emperor Heaven. He could imagine how Emperor Yangfeng would wail and whine if the gods of Crimson Light era were to really come ashore. Suddenly, rays of light burst forth from the center of this ruin. Twang! A ball of light expanded and brought the sea water to bombard Qin Mu and First Ancestor. Qin Mu could faintly feel as though these rays were sieving through him. The tremors were very fine, but they penetrated deeply as though the smallest atoms in his corporeal body were also trembling non-stop. This made his corporeal body and primordial spirit feel a numbing sensation. WHRNG, WHRNG, WHRNG. Multiple rings of light expanded out from the center of the ruins and swept past their bodies over and over again. The sea water surged and the rings of light actually pushed the sea water away. The ball of light propped up a huge barrier, and not a single water stain could be seen in these ruins. Even the ground was completely dry. Bang, bang, bang. Huge beasts from above crashed into the ruins. Some crashed on the palaces while some crashed on the streets. The situation was very messy for a moment. Inside this ball of light, there seemed to be no air as these huge beasts opened their mouths while trying to suck in big mouthfuls of water, but they couldn't suck in anything. Some of these huge fishes with 3 heads and 6 arms were shaking their tails and fins, trying to crawl out. The plants in the sea also wanted to rush out of these ruins as they moved their roots to escape. However, the sea creatures were still running faster. At this moment, a pillar of light erupted from the ground and rushed into the sky. It pierced the sea above and opened up a passageway. Gale rushed in and poured into this underwater god city. The huge beasts seemed to instantly breathe. However, those huge fishes still couldn't as they continued to crawl outwards. All of a sudden, the ground where the light pillar had exploded out started to tremble. A huge circular ring gradually rose from it, and it gave off cracking sounds as a second ring appeared, followed by a third and a fourth. Extremely intricate runes appeared on the circular rings, and God Kaiishi was currently standing in the center with his 6 arms stretched out in all directions. The circular rings started to swirl, and with God Kaiishi in the center, the runes surrounding him instantly lighted up. Bright runes flew out and shined in all directions. Qin Mu instantly saw runes falling on the sea creatures, and there were actually runes appearing on them. Those rune markings seemed to be complicated, as they appeared like locks that were interlocked together, forming a kind of seal. When the runes of the circular rings shone on this seal, the locks opened up layer by layer. This is bad. He is about to unseal these gods of Crimson Light era, and recover their true form. Qin Mu immediately made a decision, and patted his Daotai sack. Mirrors flew out, and these mirrors were what he usually used to groom himself. He didn't have much, just 5 to 6 pieces. Qin Mu then took out his sword pellet, which expanded to form a huge mirror, combined from 8,000 swords. This mirror flashed brightly. First ancestor human emperor hurriedly stopped him and asked, "What are you doing?" Breaking his spell. Qin Mu quickly explained, God Kaiishi is trying to use the runes on the rings to shine around and undo the seals on these huge beasts, returning them back to their original bodies. I just need to reflect the runes and flip them. This way, he won't be able to unseal these gods. First ancestor human emperor widened his eyes as he stared at him. After a moment, he praised, this divine weapon of God Kaiishi is a divine weapon of creation. The runes on it are complicated beyond measure, and even I would need to spend much effort to solve it. Never did I expect you to think of such a simple method to render it useless. You are not only the Overlord body, you also have an incomparably smart brain of the Overlord. But there's no need for you to go through so much trouble. Just let him unseal them. Qin Mu shook his head. He was extremely nervous. I can't. The gods of Crimson Light era are skilled in battles, and from the actions of God Kaiishi, this person can resort to anything to achieve his goals. If the gods of Crimson Light were to be unsealed and recover their true bodies, this would probably be a disaster for eternal peace. The enemies of our enemies might not be a friend, they can also be enemies. He will never ally with us, so I have to break. There's already no need for that. You are looking from the perspective of the races. On the other hand, I'm looking from the perspective of paths, skills, and divine arts. First ancestor human emperor's face revealed a look of pity, as he shook his head. 35,000 years. Kaiishi probably didn't expect the gods of their era to have experienced the changes of 35,000 years. The primordial spirits in their bodies are no longer what they were before. Aside from that, their souls aren't the souls in the past anymore. Qin Mu was stunned and put the small mirrors back in his Daotai sack. However, he still kept the huge mirror formed by the sword pellet. What you mean is, the primordial spirits of these sea beasts and fishes can never be changed back anymore. First ancestor human emperor nodded his head. The time was dragged out for too long. Their primordial spirits had already started to become distorted. Crimson Light era shouldn't have high attainments on the soul and primordial spirit. They were inferior to founding emperor era. They forcefully used creation divine arts to transform the structure of the corporeal body and the primordial spirit. If they had changed back in time, they could still wake up. However, since it was dragged out for 35,000 years, the souls and primordial spirits were stuck in this different form for way too long. Not many of them will be able to awaken both their primordial spirit and soul. The person who had suggested this idea probably had an ill intention. Qin Mu's heart trembled violently as he asked in disbelief, "Do you mean that the person who had suggested this idea back then had purposely wanted the gods of Crimson Light era to never change back after becoming sea creatures?" First ancestor human emperor nodded his head gently. This person might have submitted to the celestial heavens long ago, So he laid out such a trap for the gods of Crimson Light era. Qin Mu shuddered a few times. No wonder village chief and Grandpa Blind said I was too pure, and not crafty enough. I am indeed too innocent. The rings swirled continuously, and countless runes shone quickly. More and more seals appeared on the bodies of the sea creatures, and the seals were continuously being undone. Their bodies were also starting to transform. When the rings gradually stopped, naked bodies of gods were laying everywhere in this magnificent underwater city. These gods with 3 heads and 6 arms were marked with tattoos unique to Crimson Light era. Their corporeal bodies were incomparably strong. They were the strongest bodies for combat. However, these gods remained lying on the ground and twitched their bodies continuously, as though they were still fishes or sea monsters. Some of them even stood up and spread open their arms, as though they were underwater trees. Qin Mu even saw a god of Crimson Light era scrunching his toes on the ground. It must have transformed back from a jellyfish and still thought that he had tentacles. He was blinking his eyes furiously, as though he wanted to glow like a jellyfish. Wake up. My clansmen, I'm back. God Kaiishi's voice reverberated throughout this god city with agitation, as his 3 voices overlapped together. Our Crimson Light era has returned. The battle has not yet ended. The Son of God from Crimson Light era is still waiting for your news. Wake up. First ancestor, human emperor scattered his mudra skill, and they landed on the ground. He walked towards the source of God Kaiishi's voice and said, "Let us go over." Qin Mu followed him and God Kaiishi's voice rang out once more. This time, his voice brought along bewilderment and fear. What happened to all of you? Why aren't any of you awake? Wake up. Have you forgotten our glory from 35,000 years ago? His voice became more and more flustered. He didn't understand why these gods of Crimson Light era didn't wake up like he had expected them to. He executed the rings over and over again, and runes flew out in all directions. However, they were useless on these gods. Not long after, Qin Mu and first ancestor human emperor came to the bottom of the ring, and God Kaiishi detected them. The rings stopped spinning, and this executioner of an ancient era turned his 3 heads to look over. He stared at them with a cold gaze. Cult Master Qin. Suddenly, a familiar voice rang out, and Qin Mu looked towards the source of the voice. He saw Pang Gongso standing on a tall tower, looking at him excitedly. Qin Mu was surprised and he waved his hands at him. Grandmaster. Why are you here too? Pang Gongso laughed, and his body trembled as his corporeal body transformed to have 3 heads and 6 arms. He sprinted down from the tower as his 3 heads shouted, "I've been looking for you for a long time. Now I can finally take my revenge. Look at my Anisrava fighting god technique." His footsteps stepped on the tall tower and he sprinted straight down. His 6 arms moved up and down as the mudra on his 6 palms changed unpredictably. Claps of thunder rang out as the air exploded and bolts of lightning crisscrossed in the air, randomly striking everywhere. The mudra skills of Anisrava fighting god technique were extremely terrifying, and since he had more arms, he had no openings all around him. His attack speed had increased significantly, and this technique simply had no openings. It could even absorb other people's chi and blood to allow oneself to remain at the peak state. Qin Mu raised his head to look up. Before Pang Gongso could even reach him, gales pressured down like a mountain pressing down, and the land around Qin Mu was sinking continuously. The terrifying pressure he was withstanding couldn't be imagined. Pang Gongso let out a hearty laugh as he descended from the sky. The full power of Anisrava fighting god technique was released. Boom. Pang Gongso's body trembled violently and flew back to crash into a palace hall. The smiles on his faces had yet to be wiped off. Overlapping hands. Qin Mu put his right hand forward and his left hand back. With his palms interlocked, he pushed towards Pang Gongso across space, and the overlapping power of yin-yang heaven flipping hands burst forth. With another loud explosion, rocks flew in random directions and the wall crumbled. Pang Gongso and the wall of the palace hall sunk into the hall. Qin Mu pushed dozens of times, and dozens of explosions came from the hall before he finally stopped. He runs so fast. Qin Mu shook his head and praised, as expected of Grandmaster. His cultivation has such an astonishing increase again, so is probably not far away from life and death realm now. Grandmaster still can take a beating as usual, and he's still so agile. Behind God Kaiishi, Pang Gongso's figure suddenly appeared and he was covered with blood. He had broken 5 out of 6 arms and 2 out of 3 necks. His 2 heads also hung down weakly while his body swayed before collapsing on the ground, convulsing rapidly. Qin brat, you, Pang Gongso coughed up huge mouthfuls of blood. Qin Mu turned around as though nothing significant happened. He greeted Kaiishi, Senior Kaiishi, we meet again. Crimson Light era is truly remarkable. The runes on this circular ring are runes from creation divine arts. Can Senior explain to me? His 2 eyes were in high spirits, as he revealed a look of anticipation, seeking knowledge sincerely. This expression is exactly the same as a silly roe deer. Veins popped out on the forehead of first ancestor human emperor, as he thought secretly to himself. When Kaiishi's gaze swept past Qin Mu, his pupils contracted. It was evident that he had seen Qin Mu, and it reminded him of Saint Woodcutter, and the time he was played by him. When he attacked Saint Woodcutter by surprise, he was beaten up badly. Saint Woodcutter just sent him straight to the territory of Supreme Emperor Heaven, and he had almost died because of that. If he didn't meet Pang Gongso, this person that was skilled in escaping, he would have already died in the hands of the devil race. He averted his gaze and looked at first ancestor human emperor. His heart suddenly twitched violently, as if there was an invisible pressure bearing down on his heart. That was the misperception that first ancestor human emperor's aura had on him. This person seemed to be wedged between a collapsing heaven and earth, being all alone in the world. That kind of deep loneliness and sorrow even affected Kaiishi. Are you a god of founding emperor era, or a god of high emperor era? Kaiishi composed himself and asked. Founding emperor. First ancestor human emperor had a slight headache towards Qin Mu, who was brimming with curiosity. He said softly, the paths, skills, and divine arts of Crimson Light era are indeed admirable. But, Dao brother, you should already see that it's impossible for you to awaken these Dao friends of yours. Their spirits have been lost for too long. They won't be waking up anymore. The corners of Kaiishi's eyes twitched. He sneered and said in a coarse voice, could it be you who had schemed and laid hands on my people? First ancestor human emperor frowned. Kaiishi's words made him slightly uncomfortable. Qin Mu also made him slightly uncomfortable. Qin Mu had already moved all the way to the front of those rings, and was currently examining the runes on them. He was trying to unravel the marvel that was hidden inside this creation divine art. From Kaiishi's words, he could obviously sense enmity, and for Qin Mu to move up at this time, he was too confident in his abilities. Qin Mu was full of confidence, but first ancestor didn't have such strong confidence in himself. This was the god city of Crimson Light era. Looking at the layout, this place should be some celestial palace in Crimson Light celestial heaven that had sunk into South Sea. God Kaiishi came back here painstakingly, so it shouldn't be just for the divine ring of creation. There should still be other powerful divine weapons. The divine weapons that Crimson Light era used to guard the celestial palaces must definitely be powerful. It just wasn't known if God Kaiishi had gotten them or not. Dao brother is mistaken. First ancestor human emperor said calmly, I didn't lay my hands on your Tao friends. Instead, your Crimson Light era researched only the corporeal body, which resulted in your soul, spirit embryo, and attainments in primordial spirit to be slightly lacking. Since your Tao friends had morphed for too long, this caused their souls and primordial spirits to morph as well. Kaiishi's eyes flashed with a fierce glint and he chuckled. Your attainments in creation divine arts are very superior. First Ancestor Human Emperor said, I'm not an expert, but I've met experts in founding Emperor Celestial Heavens before. His research on the corporeal body is inferior to Crimson Light era, but he only focused on studying souls, spirit embryos, and arts of the primordial spirit, so his attainments are extraordinary. I have learned some from him too. Qin Mu's heart stirred slightly. Could it be Saint Woodcutter? Great educational heavenly devil scriptures had 7 chapters, and they are all arts of creations. Saint Woodcutter must indeed have superior attainments in the art of creation. With my insight, your clansmen would probably have some people who will wake up after 3 to 5 years, but most of them won't be able to wake up. First Ancestor Human Emperor sincerely added, Crimson Light era and Founding Emperor era have the same enemy. May Tao brother put down your enmity. If we ally ourselves together, there might be a good outcome. I learned some arts of creation, so I might just be able to undo the damage and save some people back. Kaiishi took a step forward and shouted, if you really have the abilities to save my clansmen, take them out. Are you keeping them to yourself and don't want to hand them over? His left head sneered and said, that's right, he's coercing us. He wants to use the art of creation to force us into becoming his slave and fight for him. His right head roared furiously, we can chop off his head and search his soul. Won't we be able to get his art of creation in that way? First Ancestor Human Emperor frowned and shook his head. You are unreasonable. Qin Mu turned his head back and said, First Ancestor, I've told you before, the enemy of an enemy might not be a friend. Sacred Teacher once said that the people of Crimson Light era cultivated the fighting methods of the corporeal body. Most of the time, they relied on martial prowess to settle matters. This Kaiishi is even the executioner of Crimson Light Celestial Heavens. He's ruthless in his methods and it's all good if you beat him. If you can't, he will beat you and sever your head to extract your soul for studying. First Ancestor Human Emperor frowned even more and said patiently, Tao brother, we both have the same enemies, so we should join forces. Truth to be told, this Human Emperor Qin is the link to connect Founding Emperor era and Eternal Peace Empire. He is even the rare Overlord body that's in this world. Overlord body. Kaiishi revealed a look of disbelief as he cried out, this brat has the Overlord body. The Overlord body of the legends. Rumors said that there was an appearance of an Overlord body 40,000 years ago, during Dragon Han era. Qin Mu's heart felt reassured. Village Chief is indeed learned and knowledgeable. He actually knew that there was an Overlord body that had appeared 40,000 years ago, during Dragon Han era. First Ancestor Human Emperor said, since you know about the Overlord body, we have even more reason to sit down and talk. I can't trust anyone. I can't trust you, and that crafty Overlord body brat. I definitely wouldn't become the dowry of your Founding Emperor era, and this Eternal Peace era that's barely surviving. Kaiishi erupted with a roar, his aura suddenly bursting forth. My Crimson Light era shall make a comeback and descend on the world once again. No matter if it's Eternal Peace or Founding Emperor, you will all have to submit to us. Hand over the art of creation, and I can spare you from dying. You can become my follower. First Ancestor Human Emperor suddenly relaxed and shook his head. Tao brother, it is no longer Crimson Light era now. If you use the paths, skills, and divine arts of Crimson Light era, you have no chance of victory against me. All of a sudden, Kaiishi burst forth with his divine arts and struck one palm towards Qin Mu. Just as his divine art was activated, first ancestors heaven and earth mudra had directly smashed into the divine ring of creation. With a loud boom, Kaiishi's figure vanished and a huge hall behind him exploded apart. Bang, bang, bang. In a straight line, shrines and palaces exploded one after another. Dozens of palaces were crushed into powder, and there were towers that got severed in the middle, causing them to come crumbling down. Pang Gongso, who was sprawled on the ground, fell into a daze. Qin Mu smiled at him gently. Grandmaster, there's no need to be so surprised. When you used the divine arts of 35,000 years ago to attack me, this was also the result. Pang Gongso's expression changed drastically. His body suddenly vanished without a trace again. God Kaiishi crashed quite some distance before finally stopping. He gave a shout, "Crimson light heaven suppressing floor. Come out." The ground trembled violently and it cracked open. Precious light broke out from the uneven crack. The light was extremely gorgeous, like the aurora of the polar region. After a short moment, the ground rose up, as though there were some huge objects slowly rising up underneath it. A majestic and tall building, about 3,000 yards high, suddenly rose up from the ground. Even after 35,000 years, the building remained fresh, its precious rays lighting up the sea in various colors for 1,000 miles. Qin Mu looked over in awe and shock, his gaze turning blank. Under the eaves of every level in heaven suppressing floor, all kinds of divine weapons were actually hanging. Not only were divine weapons hanging off the eaves, but there was also a powerful divine weapon being worshipped on every floor. Those divine weapons gave off pulses that gripped at people's hearts. The waves of aura from them nearly materialized to leak out continuously from the floor. This building had around 1,000 floors and the divine weapons hanging from the eaves were uncountable. The divine weapons being worshipped on the floors had also reached 1,000. They were probably the treasures that guarded each floor. Qin Mu muttered, "If I could take this away, and bring it to eternal peace, the value of this thing could make the emperor give up his throne." First ancestor human emperor stared at him. He then walked over to that heaven-suppressing floor. "Stay here, don't run around. Don't even think of touching this building too. Just study your creation, divine art here obediently." Qin Mu nodded, his eyes still in a daze as he stared at the tall building that was shining with a variety of colors. On the other side, God Kaiishi was already on the first floor of the divine building. He took out the divine weapon that was being worshipped on the first floor. It was a divine knife. Kaiishi took down the divine knife from the sacrificial altar, and another divine knife appeared on the altar. Kaiishi grabbed this divine knife and another divine knife appeared again. Kaiishi had grabbed 6 times until no more knives appeared. Qin Mu looked at the situation inside the building and said loudly, "First ancestor, Crimson Light Era's divine weapons are usually in a set of 6. Got it?" First ancestor human emperor walked into the building and saw God Kaiishi swinging 6 divine knives at him. He heard a world-shaking explosion as God Kaiishi retreated back into the floor with messed-up footsteps. First ancestor human emperor walked into the first floor, and God Kaiishi's knife skills suddenly started operating. All of a sudden, the divine weapons hanging under the eaves of the first floor burst forth with power to strike at first ancestor human emperor. Qin Mu studied the runes of the divine ring of creation leisurely. He took out some paper and brush, and copied everything down. Pang Gongso, who was far away, gave a cheer when he saw the sight in the building. "Nice kill." Boom. Countless divine weapons shattered and the shattered pieces flew in all directions, piercing through countless palaces. Pang Gongso hurriedly shrank his head back in utter fear. Qin Mu didn't even turn his head. "Grandmaster, don't underestimate the first human emperor of Hall of Human Emperors. Kaiishi has this celestial palace of Crimson Light era, but first ancestor human emperor also controls the Hall of Human Emperors. The secret behind the Hall of Human Emperors isn't any smaller than this Crimson Light celestial palace. While Qin Mu was talking, Kaiishi had already fallen back to the second floor. In an instant, countless divine weapons on the second floor exploded and turned into powder. As the two of them fought, Kaiishi fell back step by step. He found it hard to defend himself. Pang Gongso raised his head to take a look and cried out, "That human emperor didn't use any spirit weapons and just fought with his two hands." He shattered all the precious artifacts that suppressed the celestial palace of Crimson Light era. When Qin Mu heard this, his heart trembled slightly. He looked at once at Crimson Light heaven suppressing floor. He indeed saw that first ancestor human emperor was bare-fisted, and he was revered between heaven and earth. He let heaven and earth run amok, and as long as he didn't fall, heaven and earth would never collapse. Heaven and earth mudra is truly powerful. Qin Mu pulled back his gaze and continued studying the runes. A pity they aren't as good as my sword skills. First ancestor human emperor fought god Kaiishi all the way up to the 300th floor. He seemed slightly delighted as he thought, when human emperor Qin sees my mudra, he will definitely change his mind and beg me to teach it to him. This video will end here.